We Trust Trustees. So this is towards the end of your pack, and I do believe it's on page 69.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Right, you're going to have to talk about it. Do you have the Constitution?
Right.
Okay, so is everyone on page 69 now? So we can go on?
Yes.
Okay, so do I see a delegate to give the speech in favour of this motion? Okay, Ashlyn, you've got 2 minutes from when you get onto the podium.
She doesn't do it every time, just to rub it in now.
Okay.
Right, basically at the moment we're a collection of students who get money. Just that. We're not really a legal charity. We don't have charitable status, and to get charitable status we have to have a trustee board. It's not optional. And gaining charitable status gives us a lot of benefits in terms of fundraising and legitimacy, really. Okay. Don't need to speak more for this.
And are there any points of clarification? Okay.
Is this the same as the norm for student associations to be?
Yes, I think we're the only students' association, at least in Scotland, with a black grant of over 100,000 that is not got a charitable status and trustee board.
Okay. Any other points? Okay. Anyone on PC? Are you keeping an eye open? So thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Ashlyn. Okay. So we
do have an amendment for this one.
Okay.
We don't have to do that. We have two.
Okay. So we have two amendments. Amendment 1, which I think is just on page 70, and a tiny bit on page 71. Do we have a delegate who's going to? Yes, thank you, Scotty. And I think you have 1 minute. Is that right? Yes.
Hello. It said that Vivaldi didn't write 1,500 violin concertos. He wrote one concerto 1,500 times. You'll see that there's a theme running to my amendments, and you're probably going to get bored of me talking about it by the end. Trustees is absolutely the right thing to do, but the current system has about 1 year left. This isn't really the time to do it. It's absolutely not only UHISA but for the local students association as well. But there's a project, a well-funded project looking to reorganise student associations right across the Highlands and Islands, and a trustee board is absolutely one of the things that should be right at the top of the shopping list. But for the effort involved in doing this now for UHISA on the eve of all these big changes is I just don't think there's enough time.
Do you want to hang on for any points of clarification on yours?
Yes.
So do we have any points of clarification on the amendment 1? Okay, no points of clarification. Thank you. Can I just ask, did that work having a 5-second warning, or would you like a 10-second warning?
10-second warning.
10 seconds, okay.
Give me a 5-minute
I wasn't sure with a minute which would be better. Okay.
Sorry, am I too late for a question?
No, not at all.
Sorry, I didn't stick my hand up in time for the clarification. Since this is going to come up quite a lot as we discuss motions, is it possible to have just a couple of minutes from Scotty about what this project is aiming to do, how it's going to impact on UISA? Because I don't know about everybody else, but I'm looking at this as I've had a questionnaire through. I don't know how this is going to change UISA. I don't know if this is we're going to flatten the whole of UISA and build it back up again, or what. And I can't really vote on the amendment without understanding what the project intends to do.
Yeah, I think, Joe, that's really a very good point. That survey is very important. Fill it out, make sure all your friends fill it out, and tell all their friends to fill it out as well, because that will shape the future of what students' associations at a local and at a regional level, and it will have a national impact as well, I'm sure as well, because other institutions are going to be looking at our research afterwards. I'd like to give more answers on what is likely to come out of it, but yes, it will lead to a substantial restructuring. That's what there was a debate a few years ago, and it comes along basically what happened across Scotland. There was a regionalisation of colleges, and there was a pot of money, and rather than us fight amongst ourselves. We got money to do research to find out what our actual students wanted, and then that and pay somebody to take time to consider all the options, to look at best practice elsewhere, and possibly rebuild things from scratch, or at least enhance on what's on the existing structures. So am I rambling, or am I answering your question?
Kind of. So essentially, at the end of this, there's a good chance that the UISA constitution is going to be rewritten.
There's a good chance that by the time, because I don't think we'll get through half of these motions today, there's a good chance that by the time most of this gets debated, we will actually have a system, we will have a rough idea on what it's going to look like, and it will have superseded it all anyway.
Joe, do you feel that's enough to actually answer your query?
It does. I'm just wondering, in terms of the timescales, that's going to apply to everything we talk about today. So would it not make sense to just have a block vote of the rough wording of this applies to everything, rather than have to go through the amendments on every motion?
I would like to, if council takes the general gist of what I'm saying, then I would be quite happy just to waive my amendment speeches in order to pass this. I think, but I still think it's.
I know there are some that you've got specific changes in.
Yeah,
but
yes. Where is a specific change? I would certainly, I can certainly highlight that. I was going to say something clever there. Sorry.
Sorry, we're just trying to decide the best way of going about this and proposing it to the group. Do you want me to cover it?
No, you just keep me right. I think in terms of this, I think you actually raise a good point, and I think we could all do with reminding that UHISA isn't going to stay the same for very long at all. But I do think we probably need to be making decisions about UHISA in the here and now. So I think we'll take this time to recognise for the minutes that UHISA is going to change drastically.
Yes.
But I don't think we can bring it up every time.
Well, look, as Joe said, there is, and sometimes there are specific points. And I think that discussing these motions now is actually potentially very valuable to the project, because it gives us the opportunities to say one of the absolute top thing that we want is a trustee boards. That's really important, and I think that this is certainly it is worth having the or perhaps not. It's up to council. So by passing these motions, I think we can certainly help inform the project. But I think we do need to be aware that the amount of work involved in actually actioning some of these things, the project will have it done before we do.
I wonder if I could propose a way forward, because there's this and there's also Michael's amendments which relate to the Constitution, and I potentially think there's a way we could deal with both of these if we actually take a view on now. So if we just think in a moment, we just pause in the discussion on the original motion, and to get the general gist of student support here at Student Council today. I don't necessarily think that anything that's been said is particularly contentious, but that's not to influence you. I think it's just that I'm seeing quite general. I think people are generally agreeing with Scotty's point. But if we, and I think I'd like to propose taking this and taking the Constitution things and actually taking a view on Council as a whole, rather than doing it per amendment and repeatedly. If we could just discuss the following two things. Yeah?
No, I was just going to say, can I suggest then that where these amendments appear in the paperwork, if we leave it to the chair to note that they have appeared, rather than have a conversation on them, which is basically going to be the same debate over and over again.
I think we need to go further as well, if council agrees, and I think we need to formally note these two, to actually discuss and note these two motions, so that actually the comments the comments which Scotty's made here, I think we need to decide whether as a whole we agree with these and that we'd like a statement to this in the minutes. And also I think we need to discuss the Constitution. I think this will actually be a cleaner way potentially of doing it, and actually this is a way we can go forward in the motion discussions, but take these two issues out. So first of all, I think we have discussed this particular amendment now in terms of the situation with post-regionalisation, and then we'll discuss the Constitution in Ronald.
There's some unique factors in each of the amendments. It's not just a generic term.
No, and I think we'll have to filter those through as and when they come up, because I think they don't, and they're not per everything either. I think it's just they've been identified where the workload, this one particularly, the workload would have an impact on it. Michael's is obviously where the constitution is.
I agree. It was just the unique points need to be addressed.
Yes, yeah. So it wouldn't be that in discussing it separately now we would erase those amendments completely. What we'd do is we'd review them on an ad hoc, an individual basis and see whether it's appropriate to drag anything out of that, or whether we're actually sort of, I suppose it's two general policy points we're talking now in terms of student council. Now, is everyone happy with that approach and discussing these two now? Is that So if we just So what we'll vote on, I think if we, can I just formally see a show of hands that everyone's happy to proceed as that is? So we have a majority that we're happy to proceed there. So if we go, so like I say, we'll park the trustees' discussion formally at the moment. We're going to look at what Scotty's just presented here. Now, if I could just recap on what we've just said, because I know that we thought we'd start with some nice easy ones and everything else. We've ended up the most convoluted way of looking at all these motions possible. So what we're looking at now is what is proposed on page 70 specifically, and it's the general gist. Scotty, would you like to summate this? So the general gist of this in terms of getting a statement of the council, and we can ask people to vote if they're happy on this.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep. We're not speeches for and against it.
Well, I think if we summate the position originally, and then we'll look at anybody who wants to speak for and against, and then we'll vote. But I think because we've just moved along, I think it might help to have a quick recap for a minute, if that's okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yep. Sure. I'm not really sure what else to say about it. I mean, yes, there is a general theme, but like it says, each motion. I mean, and I think a lot of the issues are important, but I think they've been taken without considering the bigger long-term picture. And that's not necessarily the fault of the people proposing the motions. There's a lot of good ideas, and there's a lot of things that will take us into the best practice of what we see in our students' associations. It's just that that work is already ongoing anyway. I think to blunder on without reference to the project will create a lot of work. And work that we don't necessarily have a capacity to do. It also, from the local student side, association side of things, they're also having will have similar issues, and I think we need to work together with them on that also. So, yes.
Thank you. So, the situation we have now then is that what we're looking at is potentially asking Student Council today to indicate whether or not they're happy to effectively everything that is going to be packaged today. This is a formal acknowledgement, I suppose, of the unique situation that UHISA is currently in. We have a year where the representation project is still ongoing. We don't know what the outcome of that is going to be. And I suppose also what we could formally, and this isn't written, so Luke, do you want to chip in?
Just a point of clarification. The recommendation of the student representation project will happen in 2015, but it might take time for that to become
exactly
reality.
So I think the thing is that so we're talking about it over a year really before we even get an indication which direction we may be heading in. So yes. So I think what we're discussing now is Student Council happy to everything that we are looking at today to package in light of the fact that we are in a unique situation? We can set these aims and we can set these ideals and in the plan of work, but we acknowledge the situation we're currently in, and it may or may not be possible to follow some of these motions verbatim. It would have to be in light of the unique situation we're in. Now that is the situation. Yes, Dane.
No, carry on.
Okay. What I was going to say is I think that is the proposal that we're going to put forward now in the way of dealing with this series of amendments, acknowledging the specific details of some of the amendments.
Will this carry the amendment into each motion, or?
What I think it would be easier to remove that and actually say that in light of everything that we're looking at today, we have to be realistic about the situation that we are in and taking this forward.
I think it needs to be mentioned every time
the
amendment has been put in. I think it needs to be mentioned that a similar amendment has been put into a motion, but I think in terms of
can I make a suggestion?
Yeah,
the UISA believes 7, 8 and 9 in this amendment and Scotty, please correct me if I'm wrong, these are the parts that are fairly consistent through all of the amendments. We then have further believes and UISA resolves, which essentially change what's been put in front of us for the motion. Would it be sensible to have a vote now to accept the text of the UISA believes 7, 8 and 9 as encompassing what we're discussing, that go in with each of these motions, to make it clear to anyone reading the motions that we have taken this on board and accepted it?
Yeah, and I think that's the general gist of what we're talking about in the policy discussion. I think that's probably an easier way of looking at it. Do you want to mention that?
I'm a bit confused as to whether we're simply acknowledging that we will be working with the student representation project, or if we are accepting that these motions do not take effect. We actually are just putting them as recommendations to the project. I'm confused as to whether
we're looking at UISA in the here and now.
No, yeah, but I mean, if we're voting on this amendment, are we voting for each of the motions to go through the actions that are listed?
The motions, the way that I think it might be easier to do is actually treat the motions as they are written and as if nothing's changing, but we package it in the lighter policy situation.
What I'm not understanding is whether that then means that if we pass on the Trust Trustees thing, if that means that we'll do it in the way that Scotty's amendment says it, or if we do it while giving a hat tip to the student representation project. I don't know how that affects how we act on that.
Elsa, you're next.
I'm also slightly confused by this. I just feel like Scotty's, like, all dues to you guys. I love you. But it's like basically what I feel this is saying is, that things might change in the future. Well, things are going to change in the future, and we wouldn't be able to get anything done if we always hampered ourselves by saying, oh, but it might change. Well, yeah, of course it might change, but we're not talking about what's happening in 2 years. We're talking about what we want to start doing now. And when we get there in 2 years' time, then we'll reassess everything. I think if we hamper ourselves by having to say, but we have to put caveats in because things might change. Well, I just don't think we're going to get anything done.
And I think that's why
we wasted
considered. Yeah, I know, and that's why I wanted to take this separately, because I think we need a general council discussion. In a way, this could have been presented as a motion for discussion in what we are doing, how we package it, how we're actually presenting everything for the next year. Do you want to come back on Elsa and Ashton?
Well, I mean, it's not as far off as that now. I mean, things are moving fast, and by the time the incoming sabbatical officers take post, then we will have a greater idea. I'm actually concerned that the chair appears to be throwing out my amendments in one go. I think that actually it might be better just to stick to the full system and take each.
We did just take a vote, and everyone was happy to take this as a policy issue separately. I'm happy to take a vote again to see if that's changed anybody's opinion, but we did have a formal vote on whether everyone was happy to take this and the series of amendments on the Constitution presented by Michael as a separate issues, policy issues.
I think also you did define your amendments when you stood up and said, basically you're going to hear this again and again. You're saying we're going to hear this again and again, and as Elsa said, if we have this kind of time spent every time an amendment comes up like this, then the motions are not going to get seen to. Now, if that's the decision of council, then so be it, and obviously we go along with it, but we're going to lose out on what amounts to a lot of democracy to go through the same conversations again and again.
I don't know if this is what you were saying anyway, but would it not just make sense to have it formally minuted?
Exactly.
That basically what you said, that this may change in the future, but right now we're not discussing the future, we're discussing right now.
I think each version of the amendment does look at each motion individually as well. Yes, there's a running theme, but there are also specific points in relation to each motion that says to each motion, yes, that is really good, but that needs to be a recommendation of the project, or will probably happen. I think that they do need to be taken on. We don't need to go through the repetitive parts of it every time, but I still think that there are specifics, and I would be quite happy if it went to parts of whatever and people wanted to remove particular. But I don't think I'm not particularly happy about the chair proposal to just just say we know that, throw that out.
Right. Okay. I'm going to recap now because I really think we need to move on. So Scotty's acknowledged that I know Ashley had comments and Joe had comments. we voted to look at this as a statement from you guys instead of looking at the individual motions. I'm going to offer two options again. One is to look at these, and I'm democratically speaking, I think either of these, we could go either way. One is to look at these amendments every single time individually, okay? And the second option is to effectively do what we just voted on a few moments of, and actually making a formal policy, minuted policy, well, not policy, not as such, but an acknowledgement of the situation that we are in. Ashley.
That's the question about what that means. Because like, if we choose to do it as a policy, does that mean that we say in each of them they delete 1 and 2? Well, does that go into the policy bit, or do we then have to debate that separately? Or
well, we see, I think things have changed because when Scotty stood up there, he actually said, you know, I'm happy if everyone takes a view on this, that this is something that we don't look at per motion thereafter. But that seems to have changed.
Well, I don't want to be going over this, you know, explaining the project every single time. But I think what it says, there is an aspect on each amendment that I think need to be carried forward. I think each motion that's been put forward that I've attempted to be amended should be amended, rather than just this sort of general, oh yeah, we know that, and then throw out all the amendments, that's the actual amendments to the motions, and throw that out. I don't think council should do that.
Alan.
I think we've almost wasted as much time talking about this nonsense as we have when we've just gone through the amendments as they were. We're not getting anywhere with this, and I reckon we just do it as we would normally do it. And as it comes up with an amendment, as Scotty says, he doesn't have to go through what the representation project is doing every single time, because we heard him the first time.
Okay.
You know, but his resolves are different.
In light of the fact that actually council voted the opposite 10 minutes ago, 15 minutes ago, 20 minutes ago, can I now ask for a vote on, is everybody happy to treat the amendments individually as and when they come up on both of these issues? Is everyone happy with that? So can I see a show of hands?
Individually, you address them like you look at if you don't have interest.
Luce Castle, if you've got your hand up, sorry, it's so dark.
I can't understand what she's saying. Sorry. She's confused, just surprised.
Okay, sorry everyone, could you put your hands up again?
This is, if everybody, what we have just discussed is that about 15 minutes ago, council took the decision that we were going to look at these amendments separately. Now, Scotty's actually since indicated he wouldn't be happy with taking this out of all the amendments. So because of the fact that council has already voted on it and said that they would like to do that, I'm asking council again whether they'd like to reconsider their decision and whether they'd like to look at all these amendments individually as proposed, as opposed to, and anybody who raises their hands now is happy with that, as opposed to
Michael's amendments.
And this applies, it applies to Michael's constitutional amendments as well. It's the idea of, are we looking at these amendments individually as written in this booklet, or are we not? And are we looking at them as separate issues? So if everyone's happy to look at the amendments as when they come up for each and every motion, can they raise their hands now? Okay.
$16 in total.
And can I have those again? And can I have anyone abstaining?
3 against. Abstains.
Okay. So after all that, we're going to go back to the. What we're going to do is we're going to look at this booklet as the amendments are written every time. So we are going to be looking at repeated similarities in some of the amendments, but we're going to look at them on an individual basis, and the comments made previously about making a general statement from student council are no longer valid. Okay? So we're going to go back to the original amendment. We've discussed the proposal, the original motion we discussed. Ashley proposed it. Scotty stood up there and took points of clarification. So I'm going to hand back to Judith for anybody against the amendment.
Okay, yeah, so do I? Okay, I'm going to say.
Joe?
Oh, okay.
Joe,
Did Joe come in first? Okay, Joe, go
Yeah.
first.
I have a simple reason to be against this amendment, and it's that we've gathered here to be the student council for UISA. I agree with points 7, 8 and 9 of UISA. UISA believes that there is a project underway and that it will impact on things. What I disagree with is UISA further believes 5, which essentially means that we're here as little more than an in-person questionnaire for the project. What we're saying here in our motions will be put forward to the project as a discussion point and isn't actually binding on UISA, and essentially says up front, whatever, we've come together and it really doesn't matter what we decide because it's going to the project and they'll decide what we do in a year or 2 years' time. And personally, I think we've come together to talk about what we want to do and to discuss the motions, not to discuss what we want to put into a project, to discuss what UISA will do. And I would agree fully with 7, 8 and 9, but I can't agree with the other parts.
Okay.
Can we take that part?
We'll look at that in a moment, yeah. We'll take that as a part.
Okay.
Long time, folks.
So I can see where I'm going. Okay, so I think we're going to have to miss another round of speeches on this amendment because we've spoken about it for so long.
Unless people want another round of speeches.
Well, I think, okay, I'm happy to go for that, but if we do that every single time this amendment comes up, I think we are going to miss out on an awful lot of things, and that would be my advice as chair. But if people want to vote on that, does anyone who would like to see an extra round of speeches about this amendment before we go to parts?
Okay.
Okay. So we're going to vote now we're going to vote about the amendment, and then we will look at parts of the amendment if the amendment is passed. Okay. So all those in favour of Amendment 1 as proposed
No, parts not first.
Parts is always before.
Parts.
We have
Parts
to change
of the amendment.
parts
Yeah.
and then no, because I think last time what we took is a vote on whether we pursue the amendment any further and then the parts on the amendment. So if it's rejected, there's no point looking at the parts. So like last time.
When you take the parts, then the amendment might pass.
Sorry?
If you take the parts first, you drop the parts that you don't.
But there would then be another. Oh, okay.
You can go both ways. I mean, would everybody like to? Can I see? Is everybody in? Would everybody like you? Oh dear. Oh well, never mind. You voted on it, but yeah. If there's a couple of ways of doing this, is everybody would like people to vote on whether we pursue this as an amendment for this motion first, and then take parts in the motion, the amendment, or would people like to take parts on this and tweak the individual one, and then vote on the amendment as a whole? Can I see those who'd like parts of the amendment before we vote on the amendment, and then parts?
I think that's
Say that again. We've voted on parts first.
Yes. So, for example, Joe, what you said is that I'm happy with 7, 8, and 9. I'm not happy with 5. So,
Yep.
would you like to take a view on that before we vote on the amendment as a whole?
Yes, please.
I think that's favour.
12, then. Oh,
Okay.
13 and lose. Yeah. 14, 15. 15.
The parts. Okay. So. We need. I would just like to revisit something. If we actually take parts in the amendment, everyone's just voted to take parts on this specific amendment. Is that is the situation we are in?
Okay.
Now, we've had one proposition of parts from Joe, who's saying that we want to remove. Well, effectively, Joe, were you saying you wanted to retain 7, 8, and 9 and remove everything else?
Yes. Yeah. My part would be I would like to retain the UISA believes 7, 8, and 9, and remove UISA further believes and UISA resolves, leaving the original motion for UISA resolves 1 and 2.
Is anybody else proposing parts that is different to that which Joe's just suggested? Donald?
More or less, is almost exactly the same, but I'm going to keep in the UISA resolves number 3.
Okay, this is
With the number 3, not delete not 1 and 2,
Yeah.
just number 3.
Scotty, did you have a point to make?
Yeah, I agree with that. That's better.
Just delete 5.
Okay, right. Joe, can I ask you please to talk in favour of your parts and explain what your parts
Yeah.
are?
Can I, having heard Dane, I think that was Dane talking there. I actually agree with Dane that I would leave.
Yeah, whatever.
I would leave UISA resolves 3.
So what we are looking at now is that we are retaining 3, but we are removing the further beliefs 5.
Yes, and the reason I would suggest that is, as I've mentioned before, 5 essentially makes this entire council nothing more than a talking shop of ideas to put forward to a project.
And we'll also, the resolves, we are removing delete 1 and 2. So what your part is suggesting is we are retaining 7, 8 and 9 on page 70 of the document, and we're removing point 5 and further beliefs. We're removing delete resolves, but we are retaining 3 in new heights of resolves on page 70 of the document.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, can I see is anybody interested in discussing this further before we go for a vote on those parts? Can I show of hands if anyone wants further information about pros and cons? Would anybody like to speak against those parts?
Yes. What it says, I think we need to retain delete 1 and 2 and keep 3. And but what it says, I do want to remove the further beliefs part.
Okay, so actually,
a procedural comment. People in the room, could you please move up to the podium when you're giving a speech in favour or against anything, because it's only fair on the people on BC that they can see your face properly when you're giving a speech.
Okay, I'm just going to recap where we are, because we're now taking a vote on Joe's parts originally. So actually, Scotty is proposing parts and parts of the amendment for the motion. So I think what we'll do is I suppose that what we do is take a vote on, we'll have to take a vote on Joe's parts. And is everybody happy with taking that vote and then moving forward onto the amendment as a whole and moving back to the motion? I don't think we can discuss this any further particularly, and we are kind of exhausting ourselves on one motion, which is going to come up again. So what I'm asking now is those in favour of the following parts to the motion, to the amendment on page 70, to the emotion on page 69. There's so much emotion. Okay, so your Heisa believes 7, 8 and 9 on page 70 is retained. We remove Uhaisa further believes 5, we remove Uhaisa resolves 1 and delete 1 and 2, and we are retaining resolves 3. Everybody in favour of that part to that amendment to that motion, raise your hand now, please.
16.
Right. Those against? 3 against, and I think that means 1 abstaining. But those abstaining?
1.
Oh, we keep getting bigger, that's a good thing. So, right, okay, so I'd just like to recap the situation. We've just voted in favour of those parts. So what we're now going to look at is the amendment as we've just discussed it. So we're going to vote in favour of the amendment on page 70, but we are removing the further beliefs section, and we are removing delete 1 and 2 Uhaisa resolves. Dane, have you got all that for your...
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Right. I think we just miss out any further speeches because I think we've talked this to death. So if we could just have a vote in favour of the amendment as a whole, for the amendment. Sorry?
Yeah, not just a vote in favour. If you don't like the amendment, you don't have to...
No, you don't have to vote in favour.
Okay.
Those in favour of the amendment as now presented.
$15.
15 in favour, those against? And those abstaining?
Sorry.
2.
Okay, so the amended motion, the amended amendment rather, has passed. Now we're going to go back to the motion as a whole.
We have another amendment.
We do have another amendment.
Okay, I'm going to hand over to Judith for the second amendment.
Stop Lydia stealing my chairing time. Okay, so she can't help herself. Okay, our second amendment was proposed by Michael, and yes, excellent. Okay, Michael, so you get a minute to talk about your amendment, and whenever you're ready.
Starting now. Good morning, everybody. Michael McMillan, mature student officer, speaking to the amendment on page 71, and I'm withdrawing it. The logical reason is simply this, that what this amendment seeks to achieve is going to be achieved anyway, because we are in quorate. We are 20 now, I think, and we need to be 30 to do proper business. And if we're not quorate, then what I want to achieve by this amendment is going to be achieved anyway. Can I just add something, though, because unless I'm already up to my minute, I do think that one of the complications, and you're handling the complications very well, you've got my admiration, is that at this point we should be discussing, in my submission, the resolution only, the resolves. The other elements are arguments in favour of what we as a body are trying to resolve to do. And I think we get into endless complications because we're discussing policy aspects ahead of, or as well of, alongside the elements that we're trying to resolve to do.
Thank you. Thank you. Could I just ask you a question? I gather from what you're saying that this will apply to all the amendments that you put in with similar wording.
Precisely. Just to make that clear for the record, yes.
Thanks. Okay, so that amendment is withdrawn. So we're going to move on to summation. And Ashlyn, would you like to summate?
I'd like to waive it.
Okay, the summation is waived by Ashlyn. Does anyone else want to summate? Okay, Alan, you've got 30 seconds.
Just quickly, it won't take you 30 seconds.
Okay.
Vote for this motion. It's very important. As Scotty said, it could take a long time to get this done. We need to start now. So vote in favour.
Thank you. Okay, so now we're going to go to a vote. At last, I hear you cry. Okay, right, so all those in favour of the motion, which has been amended, please raise your hands now. Brilliant. I think
that's everybody but formally against. And formally abstaining.
She's doing it again. What do you know? Okay, so that motion is passed, and as Lydia will be very pleased to hear, I'm going to pass back over to her.